Nico Iamaleava, for those that don't follow college football or can't pronounce the name, just want to call him Nico. That's cool too. He was Tennessee's starting quarterback last year and probably most famous for signing a gigantic NIL deal on the way into college at the University of Tennessee. Reportedly, it was like $8 million deal, about $2 million per year, something like that. We never know the true details because, well, there's no transparency in college football, and there's a lot of other issues. Some of those issues came up just this past week before Tennessee's spring game. Nico Iamaleava decided he wasn't going to play, and he wanted to renegotiate what he was being paid for this upcoming season. Now, according to reports, Nico Iamaleava, his family, his representation, whoever you want to point the finger at, he was scheduled to make $2.4 million, but they were asking for $4 million, and their way of leveraging the University of Tennessee to do this was saying, we're not going to play in the spring game. So let's actually hear the words of their head coach there at Tennessee, Josh Heupel, before their spring game. Lee?
Coach Heupel, you wrap up spring practice today. Obviously, lots of attention. A lot of people want to know what's the status of your quarterback room as you work through today.
Yeah, we got two guys in that room. Excited to watch them go play. They've had a really good spring. They've grown throughout it. Excited about getting out, having a chance today, get out in front of our fans, and our guys go compete today.
What has the last 48 hours been like in dealing with that?
Man, listen, it's the state of college football. At the end of the day, no one's ever bigger than the program. That includes me too. And we got an opportunity. We got a bunch of guys that are going to give their all for Tennessee. And we move forward. We've got a great group. Let's go compete.
So there's Josh Heupel giving his 2 cents on it, right? No one person's bigger than the program. And I think those are words that probably some Tennessee Volunteers fans are excited to hear. They're probably words that some of the boosters who helped fork over the cash to pay Nico Iamaleava are excited to hear too, not allowing a young man to basically hold them ransom. And I think most people who are Tennessee fans would tell you there was a lot to be desired based on his play last year. And there was reports that he supposedly tried to do this, and I shouldn't say he, could be his family, could be his agent. I've got more on this where I think it's more maybe his representation, but he tried to do this before the playoff last year. Tried to leverage, again, the system and the amount of money he was being paid before the playoff game, threatening to not play in the playoff game if he wasn't compensated more, compensated additionally to what he was already being paid. So this is the state of college football, VAR. This is how things are working out. You now have a young man who's put his name in the transfer portal. The University of Tennessee has moved on. Some would say rightfully so. I'm not sure there's too many people who are being sympathetic to the player in this instance. You know, they're hoping things work out, but just give me your thoughts.
You know, we talked about this on Saturday, and it turned into a pretty passionate conversation. I mean, for me, my takeaway from it stems maybe beyond the player himself, because this now marks a new approach, or it's now out there, this approach. Like, okay, if you were to take a list of all the players who have done what Nico has done around the country at some of these top schools, I think people might be blown away if there was a true list of the players that have maybe tried to do this. And so for Heupel to come out and basically say, we're not doing it, like we're not doing it this way, it now has to open up the conversation of moving forward, what are going to be the rules of engagement? Because I think this thing is going to get worse before it gets better without there being any more real organization connected to what's taking place. Like we joked about it the other week and talking about anyone can represent these guys at this level. There's no real, monitoring, or you don't have to pass a test to represent the kid. So, now the question comes into play, is this somebody ruining the kid's opportunity and ruining his career because they see dollar signs for themselves in this opportunity? You know, it's sad to think that is a harsh reality that has always been connected to sport when thinking about some of the backgrounds and areas that some of these young men come from. So to me, when I saw the news and I heard the news, you know, it just makes me start thinking like it's a sad state of affairs right now, in my estimation, because these are going to be the stories that continue to come out, and these are going to be the stories that start to dominate college football and maybe even college sports. And I just wonder how much time is it going to take for there to be a realization and an understanding that, one, while knowing that I believe it's a good thing to be able to pay the players, you know, that are generating money for the university. I have no issues with it. But I think we're starting to get away from the idea that going to college is an institution of learning. And it just seems as though education is being put so far in the rear view, in the periphery, that it becomes a little, you know, disturbing. And that was one of the first things I thought about, like, what are you going to school for? Are you going to school to just make money, or are you going to school to build your mind, build your community? Right. I don't think that there has to be necessarily one or the other, Q. I just think that now that we had this happen, it's going to open the floodgates to now coaches got to man up or not man up. Like, it's either we got to find a way to keep the kid here, or we're not going to be held hostage by any kid and we're going to get rid of them. And then what does that mean? You know, how does that play out? Because some of these kids, they are good enough. Some of these kids, they do project out where you'd say, I don't want to lose this kid, but can we afford to pay him this amount of money? So I just think that the lack of structure and the lack of preparedness to getting to this point in college athletics, and seeing how the lack of structure and the lack of preparation, to me, from the governing body, I just think that it's a sad story until we start seeing, you know, solutions that are brought to the forefront that could actually maybe begin to stabilize the rules and the regulations of how you engage and how you do things and how contracts are done. It's just going to, I think there's going to be more and more sad stories that come out, because for what it's worth, Q, this is a sad story. This is a sad story for that young man. It's a sad story for Tennessee's program, and it's a sad story for college sports, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. By the way, we're coming to you live from the TireRack.com studios. TireRack.com will help you get there. An unmatched selection, fast free shipping, free road hazard protection, and over 10,000 recommended installers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be. There's a lot of layers to this. I mean, the first one, aside from everything you just said, was how Tennessee actually found out about this. Tennessee initially was informed that Nico Iamaleava, his agent and his family, whoever's all behind the scenes as far as his party, if you will, was sniffing around for NIL deals. Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon, reportedly was who tipped off Josh Heupel that the representation from Nico Iamaleava was sniffing around for a better NIL deal. Like, that's the wild part. And by the way, kudos to Dan Lanning for stepping up, being a man, informing another coach this crap was going on. Because this is the only way in the current structure that this can actually work. Yeah. Is if other coaches are able to hold each other accountable and say, hey, man, I wouldn't want this to happen to me. And so just so you know, like, this is what this kid's doing. This is what his family, this is what his representation's doing. And again, I don't want to put it all on the kid. Because
it could be the sad thing that somebody else is doing it on his behalf, right? Like,
sure.
We don't know.
Hold on. Let me finish. There's an agent that's a part of this, obviously. There's the family that's a part of this. But I will say this. When you're 20 years old, all right, we ask young men and women at 18 years old to go serve our great country. And if we're asking them to be able to make that decision, or if we're asking them and we're really putting them in charge of some incredible responsibilities. I also think we need to stop acting like these young people aren't capable, too, of making decisions and understanding how this is going to impact them and understanding how this looks. Like, we're not getting them to understand at any point in time. He's been at Tennessee now for years. We're not getting him to understand. You made a commitment. Like, you signed it. You agreed to it. And by the way, you haven't necessarily outperformed it. Like, I understand there's probably a time and a place in professional sports where a player signs a contract, he outperforms it, and then he wants a new one. This is not that. This is not that. I don't think any Tennessee Volunteer fan would say he exceeded our expectations based on the hype coming in, what he was signed for, and what he was producing, what he was doing. So, in no part, no way, shape, or form, and by putting this all on him, but you're also not naive either. Like, you've grown up in an era where, like, you know this stuff is coming around, you know how this works, you understand how this is going to impact you. And there's an element of like, hey, you're still the player. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, you still make the decision, even as a 20-year-old, to put on your helmet, go out there and say, I'm still going to participate in the spring game. We'll figure this out after the fact. I'm still going to honor my commitment. We'll figure this out at some point. And if we don't, so be it. Like, that's more of the issue. Like, you brought up the point of, academia and how getting your degree plays a role or factor in all this. Here's the one thing that I'd challenge, because look, I'm as big of an advocate for getting your education, getting your degree, if it's going to lead you to what you want to do, what you want to work, your profession later on in life, or provide you that foundation to do that later on in life. I think there's two ends of the spectrum here. There's that portion of it where you've got a lot of young people who go into a college having an understanding of what they want to do, or they want to play sports and get their education and go off in the workforce. There's others that just go through the motions of it. They're going to college just to go to college. They get in debt and they leave not really having anything that's going to help them. No tangible asset to help them in the future with what they want to do professionally. So they're in debt, and on top of that, they don't even know what they want to do. So the reality as to where college sports are at right now is we've now basically said, you guys should be compensated. Now, the structure of that is more of the issue. We came out with name, image, and likeness. These players are supposed to be supported because they're so great, they're going to get marketing deals. The reality was it's just been pay for play mostly, because a lot of companies are like, wait a second, they're supposed to pay out millions to these kids when they're college kids. We're not sure if they're even going to make it to the pro level, and they're going to be gone in 2, 3, 4 years. Like, it just, with the transfer portal and everything else, like, there's no long-term commitment. There's no reassurance of that player being what they hope they're going to be. And to be quite frank, there's not really any brand value, because a lot of these young people don't have a brand yet. It takes time. You have to get into the pro level and then create greatness from there moving forward. That's usually how that works. Or you got to be in college at least for a little bit. Some of these kids who come out of high school because they're a part of whatever all-star game, they feel like they've already got that. They haven't reached it yet. So to your point about the system, yes, it's entirely messed up. And there's two routes moving forward. There's the route of getting a collectively bargained agreement, which, you'd need the players to unionize. And that's one way of helping to solve some of these issues. And then there's the route of getting an antitrust exemption that allows the NCAA and the schools at B to handle all this and make it work, which seems rather unlikely. You could get federal legislation, but it seems like that's a long ways down the road. So there's not really a solution outside of the adults in the room, and I keep saying this. And that's exactly what Dan Lanning's done in this case. Stepping up and saying, we're not going to allow this to happen. Like, you don't always need there to be a rule, all right, for people just to agree, like, we're not going to break that. We're not going to do that. And in this instance, again, like, huge fan of Dan Lanning for doing it. Because, and by the way, huge fan of Josh Heupel for the way he's taken a stance saying, like, I'm not going to let this kid do it, because if I let this kid do it, then the next kid's going to do it, and the next kid's going to do it, and everyone's going to think it's okay. And so we could say it's a sad situation. I try to look at the other side of it and saying it's actually a good thing. Because if he doesn't land on his feet, or he doesn't find someone who's going to pay him the money he's looking for, every other player, every other little slappy agent that's a part of these NIL deals, they're all going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like look at how this just worked out for this player. and look at how it impacted his career and everything else. It's going to be a scary tale from here on out moving forward for a lot of players that try to do something like this.